High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
Welcome to This Week in Retro for the week of August 17th, 2020. Coming up on today's show.
The Atari VCS opens pre-orders in Australia.
Jetpac gets a makeover.
We bid a fond farewell to the inventor of the pixel.
Sonic the Hedgehog visits the Super Nintendo.
And Arcade 1-Up reveals its latest slate of fall releases.
All this and more on This Week in Retro. Up-to-date news
for out-of-date tech. Neil, our first story this week has to do with that enigma wrapped in a riddle, the Atari VCS. What is this thing? Is it a PC? Is it a console? Is it some sort of weird hybrid? Well, whatever it is now open for pre-order down under. Right now, you can pre-order the Atari VCS 800 model, which is available for $700 Australian dollars, or you can get their all-in bundle, and that gets you their specially reimagined Atari 2600 Classic stick, as well as a modern Xbox-type controller that you can use with the unit as well. The all-in bundle is going to cost you $850 Australian dollars, almost $1,000. Neil, have you taken a look at this thing before? What do you think about the Atari VCS?
I've taken a look, but before we go on, was that an attempt at an Australian accent there?
I nail it every time.
So yeah, I've looked at the Atari VCS. The thing that started ringing alarm bells for me, because this project has taken several twists and turns since its inception. And the latest thing they're talking about is Atari tokens and blockchain. Now, the last thing I want to hear about when I'm looking at a games console is blockchain. I want to think about games. I want to think about immersion. I want to think about exclusives. What can I play on this thing? So I don't like the road that they're taking it down, but it's understandable because this is a difficult thing to turn into a mini. I can understand the case for a PC Engine or for a Sega Mega Drive, those slightly later consoles. But when you go as far back as 1976, I guess, for the Atari VCS, nobody really wants to go back to those graphics and games. Somebody, I'm sure, will comment and say, I do, but the masses don't, I think. And so what do you do with this brand, with the Atari VCS? And what it looks like they've done is they've made a PC. They've made a mini PC in what is, granted, a very nice-looking case. But what's the point of it? What's the point of it other than a nice-looking case? What are your thoughts on it, John?
Well, I think I'm going to take a little exception to your statement that nobody is going to care about these things, because Atari has probably had the most successful line of mini consoles ever. AtGames produced a line of Atari flashback systems from 2004 to 2011, and they're basically plug-and-play units that allow you to play any number of Atari 2600 games from both Atari themselves and some third parties. Plus, some of the later iterations actually allowed you to plug in real Atari cartridges, I'm pretty sure. These are very high-selling units in the United States, and I think it's another classic case of when you guys were playing the ZX Spectrum and the Amstrad CPC in the UK, everybody here was playing with Atari 2600s. And when you combine that with the greater worldwide stardom of the Atari console, there is a market for these things. The question is it an $850 market? And what are they going to bring to the table that justifies that price point? Is this going to be like the Amico, where they are going to develop, up-to-date versions of their classic titles? Though advanced they may be, could easily be played on a phone or on a Switch or whatever. Or are they going to do something entirely different that they haven't even announced yet?
Yeah, and looking at the specs of it, you can get a similarly and better spec'd machine today from companies like, there's one called Minis Forum, a very, very small machine, which I use as a media center at home, that outperforms this for about $500 US. So you really are paying for that Atari name. And yes, that lovely case. And also I should point out that their remake of the classic Atari joystick looks lovely. I really do like the look of that wireless classic Atari 2600 or VCS joystick that they've created.
I have no problems with the look of this thing. It looks beautiful. In fact, it really looks a lot like it reminds me of the Spectrum Next in terms of it's very sleek, it's retro, yet it's sleek, yet it's modern. They really ticked all the boxes. The thing about the blockchain and the Atari tokens, that makes me very, very nervous because that just has scam written all over it.
Yeah, and the Atari name was recently attached to a gambling website. They've obviously allowed the use of the name for those kinds of activities, which doesn't give me confidence in whoever's running this thing.
This unit really sets a new standard in high prices for retro-inspired systems, but only time will tell if it can actually deliver. Thanks to Pixels at Dawn for suggesting this story on our subreddit.
In our next story this week, Jetpac gets a makeover. Coda Highrise has created Jetpack Rx. It's an update for the 1983 ZX Spectrum Classic, in which you have to put together your rocket and collect fuel for it while fighting enemies on a lunar surface. The update comes in the form of 2 patches, which you have to apply to the original game within your emulator. And it gives you such features as a new look Jetman, as well as new look enemies, particle effects, a new loading screen, random platform heights to add variety to the levels, as well as power-ups and a limited power supply. These didn't exist in the original game. So, John, first of all, have you given this game a go?
It is amazing. I'm a huge fan of Jetpac for the Speccy. It's probably my favorite Spectrum game altogether. And every update that they made to this, I enjoyed. I like the way that your guy looks now. I guess his name is Jetman.
That's right.
I like the way that they've reduced the flickering to almost nothing. Of course, that was when you play this thing on the original 48K Spectrum, everything on the screen is blinking all the time, and they've taken all of that out. The random platform heights, although it sounds sort of generic on paper, it really adds a lot of depth to the game, whereas in the original game, having the platform heights all at the same areas in every game, it took away from some of the replay. And just on the whole, this is what I love. I love it when people take an existing game and they make it better. You don't always have to reinvent the wheel in the retro community, and this is a shining example of that.
I agree. And speaking of Jetman, by the way, Jetman used to be a comic strip in the ZX Spectrum magazines here. And actually, a book has just been released. I think it's on Kickstarter at the moment, of all of those Jetman comics compiled into one hardback book. So that's worth looking out for. But on this game, yeah, I agree with you. It is also one of my favorite Spectrum games. I think it tweaks the original gameplay enough to make it interesting, but it doesn't break what made this game a classic in the first place. And the incredible thing is, this was a game that ran on a 16K Spectrum, 1983. It was a very early game for the Spectrum, and it holds up so well. I've always said that if you put this game in 1983 in an arcade cabinet, and you put the Williams name on the side of it, and you put it next to Robotron or any other classic game from that era, it would have taken the arcade by storm. It's that good. Whether you're familiar or not with Jetpac, I would encourage you to go and try this out. I tried it on the Fuse emulator. It was very easy to load the game and patch it using that particular emulator. And if you've not used a ZX Spectrum, perhaps on John's side of the pond, it's a great introduction to the machine, so go and try it out.
Neil, bit of a sad story now. Russell Kirch, the inventor of the Pixel, has passed away at the age of 91. Back in 1957, when he was in charge of handling the US's first programmable computer, he and a team of researchers developed a scanner that went on to capture the world's first digital images. The first digital image ever captured measured all of 176 pixels square and was a photo of Russell's son, Walden. Russell went on to lay the foundations of image processing, which of course had a direct impact on almost every aspect of technology, everything from satellite image relays, from the Apollo missions and the CAT scan. This is one of the most important inventions in technology history for sure. Neil, what was your first experience with digital imaging?
Well, we would have had access to scanners at school in the mid to late 90s, I think, or at college. But to own something like this myself, I can tell you exactly when, because I hopped onto my Amazon account and had a look. And on the 30th of December 2003, I bought a Fuji FinePix S3000 digital camera. This was a 3 megapixel digital camera with a 6x optical zoom. So I think that makes me a fairly late adopter to digital cameras, because they'd been around for a while then, but you certainly wouldn't guess that from the 3 megapixel specs. How about yourself?
Neil, the very first thing that I did when I got a credit card, I got my first job, I went out and I bought a combination inkjet printer and digital camera. And the hope was that I would be able to take digital pictures and print them out in digital photo lab quality, just like I would if I was going to the CVS or any of the drugstores. Unfortunately, I took my first picture of a Mike Tyson's Punch-Out NES cart and loaded it onto my computer, and I could barely make out what the thing was. This was the cheapest digital camera you could possibly imagine. I think it was well under 1 megapixel, and it turns out that you have to pay more than $50 for a printer digital camera combo to be worthwhile. But that was my first tentative steps into the world. Later on, I bought a 3 megapixel Canon that I carried with me all over the world when I was living in Korea, when I was living in Thailand. I took some beautiful pictures with it, and that was a real step up.
Mm-hmm. I've got this device that kind of sits in the middle somewhere, which I need to cover on the channel at some point. And it's a LCD panel that's transparent that you put on top of an overhead projector. So I don't know if you ever came across this as a teacher yourself.
No.
But it was that halfway house between using the the clear bit of paper. I can't remember what a bit of plastic that you put on the OHP. You just put this thing on an overhead projector, plug it into a PC, and it acts as a second screen to your PC, which is then projected by the OHP onto the wall. So there was this weird period where the digital imaging hadn't quite matured enough to use it in the mainstream, and they were finding these halfway houses. But right now, I'm surrounded by 4K cameras, and all of the work done by Russell Kirch has made my life possible today. Otherwise, I would be running around with rolls of film, and I probably couldn't afford to run a YouTube channel just by the film processing costs alone.
A melancholy happy trails to Russell Kirch, who has passed away at the age of 91.
For gamers who remember the Sega versus Nintendo era of the early 90s, Sonic the Hedgehog appearing on a Super Nintendo is something that would appear on a list just after hell freezing over. Well, 2020 has been a wild year so far, and if it was going to happen, then why the hell wouldn't it happen now in this year? A forum member by the name of Tiago SC over on the nesdev.com website has posted a homebrew ROM of his Sonic engine. He says it's based on the Sega Genesis code, but with many things optimized for the Super Nintendo. It has several bugs to fix, he says, and sound effects are missing, so it's not complete yet, but if you watch this thing in action or download the ROM which he's made available and try it yourself, it really is a very strange experience because it runs so well, and you're seeing this Sega exclusive title on a Nintendo. It really is quite fascinating. But for younger gamers, that era of the console wars is as old as the Battle of Waterloo now. It's irrelevant now that Sega IPs appear across all platforms in the modern day. But I don't know about you, John, but it still feels really strange to me when I see a Sega mascot on a Nintendo or a Microsoft console. How do you feel about it?
It is very strange. It's still... even when I go to the store now and I see titles like Mario and Sonic at the Olympics for the Switch or whatever, I'm like, oh, it just doesn't seem right. But of course, these days with Sega being out of the hardware business, I think that they probably make more money through Nintendo than ever. When I looked at the footage of this new Sonic game, the first thing I thought was, well, blast processing. You know, if there was ever any doubt in your mind that that was a purely marketing term, it will be laid to rest, because then the Super Nintendo can run this just as well as the Genesis can or the Mega Drive. And it makes me think about all of the other, it all comes down to coding. It's just like on any of the classic computers, when you look at ports of various things, in the right hands, almost anything can be done on any system of the same generation. I have no doubt that in the right hands, given enough time, you could port a pretty competent rendition of Sonic the Hedgehog to the Amiga, for example. It's just, how much work do people want to put into it, and how much system knowledge do you have?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would encourage people to try this out because it's really impressive. Whether or not this coder will take this game through to completion, I don't know. It may be that he's proven his point, he's made his engine, and then the task of creating a complete Sonic game off the back of that is a huge one, even if you're ripping existing assets from the Sega version of the game. So I don't know if we'll see that, but it is nice to see the point proven, and maybe that engine will evolve into something for a new and original game. We don't know. But whether you were a Sega or Nintendo fan back in the day, I would urge you to try it out. And perhaps you can wear the same look of confusion that I did when I tried it out for the first time, and keep a lookout. We'll see what it evolves into.
All right, Neil, our final story of the day comes from Arcade 1-Up. Arcade 1-Up has announced its newest slate of 3/4 size arcade releases for the fall season. Included are Marvel vs. Capcom, X-Men vs. Street Fighter, each of which contain half a dozen games from their respective franchises, as well as a Ms. Pac-Man cab that contains Pac-Mania, Pac-Man Plus, and Galaxian. Also announced was a cocktail cabinet that features some early 80s arcade hits, such as Dig Dug, Galaga, and the aforementioned Miss Pac-Man. Neil, these cabinets are very attractive, but they've turned some full-size arcade game collectors off due to perceived cheapness in materials and controls. When these things first came out, they would put demonstration units out at big box retailers like Walmart, and it wouldn't take long at all for the acrylic to wear off on the top, and you'd end up with like a completely white control panel. People complained about the quality of the sticks. They definitely were not genuine Sanwa arcade sticks. But I think that Arcade 1-Up has done a lot to remedy these things by, for example, I think most of their games now include a clear acrylic overlay for the control panel to keep the actual ink from wearing off. And they've overcome the size concerns by either selling separately or packaged with the machine risers that bring them up to the full-size arcade height, which I think is probably most of the complaints due to the fact that you really have to play these sitting down unless you are a child. So, and another thing that makes these attractive is that I don't know if you pay attention to the costs of full-size arcade machines these days, but they're going through the roof. When I got into the game, 6 or 7 years ago, you could still easily find, fully functional arcade cabinets in the realm of $150 or $200. These days, you're going to pay at least 2 or 3 times that much just to get your foot in the door on the most basic, Atari Warriors or Double Dragon or one of these dirt common arcade cabs. So this is a way for people that are new to the game, that might not have the knowledge or the time or the desire to fix up an old cab, to get that arcade experience at home. So Neil, have you had a chance to play one of these?
I haven't played one of these, but I've always followed the 1-Up arcades. The first time I owned an actual physical arcade machine was in the year 2000. And back then, the Yellow Pages was still a thing. So I pulled that out and I phoned up a local arcade because I lived in a seaside resort where in the UK, traditionally, you have a lot of old arcades. And the guy who answered said, yeah, I've got a lockup full of old arcades that I don't need anymore. Come and pick whichever you want for £50. So,
oh my gosh.
And he delivered it for that price as well. So I converted that into a MAME arcade cabinet. Now, back then, and for a long time, I was really particular about arcade cabinets. If you were going to have one, if you were going to convert one, everything bothered me if it wasn't just right. The dimensions of the arcade machine, whether the marquee lit up, because a lot of the third-party or modern ones didn't even have a working light-up marquee, whether the control panel looked right, whether you had a coin mech and an actual coin door to make the front panel look nice. All of these things, I'm going to say I was an arcade snob. But as time has gone on and the price of original arcade machines has gone up, and factoring in as I became a homeowner and the premium of space in your own home, you have to factor all of these things in. Now, yes, I like these things. I went as far as to create a mini arcade cabinet myself, a gauntlet arcade cabinet. I took a lot of pride in building that, and I chose good, solid materials. So the one thing that does still bother me with these 1-Ups were the complaints about the cheap, flimsy material. But if you're telling me that they've fixed that now, then I don't think I've got too much left to complain about. How much are these? Do you know?
Yeah, these start at $3.99. And go up from there. They just like all good retailers these days, there are several different editions that you can buy. There are add-ons. There's a Burger Time machine that is a Arcade 1-Up exclusive that you can only buy from their website. But a lot of these will make their appearance in store shelves at Best Buy or Walmart, or so you've never seen one of these on sale, just walking around your big box shops in the UK.
No, I know they are around in certain stores, but our supermarkets are quite different to some of yours. I think we go and we buy food. Unless you go to certain mega outlets, you sometimes get extra things.
What kind of a store in the UK would you expect these to be for sale in?
Something like, so Tesco's is like the food store here, but you have Tesco Extra, which is like a big mega store. I guess that would be like your Walmart store. Otherwise, I would expect it to be in PC World, electronic stores, things like that. But I don't know how it is over there, but the high street is really dying here in the UK. It really is dying a death. And I think most people, who are looking to buy one of these in the UK would probably buy one online. They'd probably go to Amazon for the convenience of having it delivered to them.
Right. I know that these are packed in sort of a, I think they're flat packed basically, and you assemble the thing at home. And I think that your ability to assemble the cabinet goes a long way to the overall sturdiness of it. I think if you're used to putting together things from IKEA and things like that, and you know what makes them sturdy, but it's definitely not going to compare to something like, 1/2-inch plywood on a traditional arcade cabinet that, you can hit with a Mack truck and it will still survive. So, but I think that these are very attractive. Part of the arcade experience for me is looking at the side art, looking at the machine running in attract mode, turning all the lights off in the room and just firing up the machines. And I've seen several pictures of people with complete collections, and it is a way to have a large selection of games for not a whole lot of money, and get that arcade specific experience in terms of having the joysticks and the multiplayer capabilities and things like that.
I agree. I think it's a fair price for the convenience of what it is. If you related to any of my comments about arcade snobbery, then this isn't for you. But there's a huge market who this is for, and I can see myself having one at some point in the future for sure.
Neil, do you have a Holy Grail arcade machine?
Yes, well, two. One is Robotron. I absolutely love that game. I think that is the pinnacle of arcade gaming. That's a game. Have you ever played Robotron 2084?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
With the two joysticks, if you play it at a cabinet, it sucks you in. You become completely immersed in this machine. It takes over your body. It's just such an adrenaline pumping game. And the other one would be a full-size sit-in Outrun cabinet, just because it feels so cool to play. How about you?
Would you like to have the Outrun cabinet that has the hydraulics and everything, or just the regular sit down? Okay, you want to go all the way. For me, I already own. I'm lucky enough to already own one of my Grail machines, which was a Mario Brothers. I've always liked the early Nintendo style cabs because of the way that their bezels work. It's sort of a 3-dimensional bezel where you have a flat plexi front and you're looking down inside into the arcade game. But I really would love to have any of the environmental style cabs, whether it's Outrun or Hang On or anything that moves you around. There was I think it's a Ferrari simulator game that I played once. It was very, very difficult. I managed to run directly into the wall when I played it, but it was such a realistic experience because the thing is moving around and the steering wheel feels like a real steering wheel. I'd probably like one of those. It takes up about 26 square meters, so you have to have a large space to put it in. All right, well, you can check out the link to Arcade 1-Up in the show notes if you are interested in putting some money down and getting one of these things. And if you jump on board, let us know.
So thank you for listening to This Week in Retro. Join our show subreddit and contribute your favourite stories from the world of retro.
Help us spread the word about the show by leaving us a review on your podcast app of choice, sharing our Facebook page, or just telling a retro-loving friend. See you next week for more up-to-date news
for out-of-date tech.